Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. And as always, I say it all the time and I say it over and over again. I am so appreciative of you for taking time to listen into the podcast because you helped us get ranked in the top 5% of all podcasts globally, according to Listen Notes. So I really appreciate you for doing that. Thank you. All right. Now, today, I'm talking with Elsa Johnson. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Elsa. She's a mindset expert and speaker who helps high achieving executives and entrepreneurs get back on track and reignite the passions they once had so they can experience more purpose and fulfillment in their businesses and lives. And she understands that most highly driven leaders often feel they're not fulfilling their highest potential. And she is committed to changing that. And she does that through her business, Elsa Johnson Coaching and Consulting LLC. Welcome, Elsa Johnson.
Thank you very much. And I am so appreciative of you having me on here today. I always love our conversations, and today we're bringing it to other people. So thank you for the opportunity.
I love that too. I love that we get to share this time together and have others listen in to conversations that we often have amongst just the two of us. All right, so you heard me read a little bit of your bio. Tell us more about either or both who you are and what you do. So a little more about who you are and what you do, either or both.
Well, they're tied together, they are intertwined because I'm born and raised in Denmark. That's my name and said a little bit different. A lot of people call me Elsie, Elise, whatever, but it is pronounced Elsa. And when I came to the US after a significant career in finance, I started working for small businesses. And eventually I had my own business in interior design. So a total diversion from where I started, right? And then about 5 years ago, I hit a roadblock myself. And I realized that you're talking about purpose on this podcast. And I realized that I wasn't living my purpose. I realized, but the most important thing I realized is it was nobody else's fault than my own. It was because I had let life happen to me instead of being an active participant. And with that awareness and learning so much neuroscience, so much psychology, so much behavioral science, I started chipping away of the things that was really holding me back from not seeing what my purpose was, what was out there that could have been very, very different. I've been busy my whole life, don't get it wrong. And I know all the listeners are too. So sometimes we forget that busyness doesn't mean like we are actually engaged.
Right.
So that's why my business is helping people find that connection. So what they're doing is engaging them in their lives and making that the life that they secretly dreamt of but never made happen till now.
Yeah. 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 It's, of course, I would think this, but it's important work. I think it's important work. And I'm glad you're doing that. And we talked about, we've had conversations before. We've known each other for years. But now I feel like we get to have a conversation. Some of it we haven't done before. So I want to go back and some of your early career life, because we've not talked about that, just the two of us. And I'm thinking for the listener, someone is thinking, maybe be thinking about a transition, right? And so to hear your journey might inspire them on their journey. And then we can go through some specific um, advice you have for them. Sound good?
Sure. Sounds perfect to me.
Okay. All right. So you said you had an early career in finance. And then from finance, you went to the design business. Is that right?
In between there, I worked for smaller entrepreneurial businesses, and they were in all kinds of industries. They were in marketing, food marketing of all things. They were in plastic extrusion. It was in biomedical sales, but it was always in the financial operational side of the business.
Okay. So now let's go back. Let's talk about you were in finance. I'm
Yes.
trying to get the transitions. I'm trying to highlight for people when you move from one place to another to another.
So
All right. So you were in finance.
finance when I lived in Denmark, right? And I really had a very rapid progressing career. And it was in my late 20s. My transition came because I met a guy, you know, cute guy.
There's always a
Only
guy.
there's always a guy, right? The only problem was he lived 6,000 miles away. Yeah. And that a lot of people say, well, it took guts for me to pull up my tent poles and move to the US. And it's a huge transition, right? But I think not foolishly, because it's 35 years, we are still married, we have two beautiful children. But at the time, it hit me at a time where I was looking and saying, how many years do I have to stay here until something new is happening? Even though I was really good at my work. And that's why I have been promoted all this, several times. Being 27 years old, being in charge of 8 people and a portfolio of, I think, $100 million. That's pretty impressive, right? But I was like, what's the fun in this? The challenge had sort of ended for me, and I was already looking and seeing, questioning, what am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think, had I been completely fulfilled in my job, had I been working my purpose at the time, I hate to say it, my husband would probably kill me for saying this, is that I might not have been as open to the possibility of me moving to the US.
Mm-hmm.
Do I regret it? Absolutely not. It has all given me a bit of what I needed to now 5 years ago in order to make that next transition.
Yeah. All right. So then when you got here, and so you didn't have that same career, and it sounds like it wasn't so fulfilling, and you were aware of that much. So how'd you decide what to do next in terms of your career?
So I want to make it perfectly clear to the listeners about transitions. Then they happen when we're not looking. Things happen in our life. You might get your husband might get a new job and you got to move somewhere. And you go from place A to place B and you don't see it as a transition. You just see it as life. And the challenge with that is that inventory that we get of learning, of knowledge, of hiding things, of suppressing things, all these things that come in these small little transitions that we do what seems so effortlessly, they're still leaving mark on our soul. They're never just a move. They're never just a new relationship or losing a friend or gaining a friend, finding a purpose. It's never. There's clues. There's little clues the whole way once we start looking at them.
Yeah. Yeah. I say the same thing. All right. So now looking back, you can see the clue. So what happened? You are here, and at some point in your life, you started working again. So what
Yes.
led you to the next thing you did?
Well, like many people, you're talking to high achieving women, right? The last thing we want to do is do nothing. So you got to do something.
Right.
And that something was, I got a job helping out a small business owner in California where we lived at the time, doing his office stuff, doing marketing, doing different things. And I learned a new skill, and it was interesting. It was cool for me to really get into that. Plus, I had to get to know this whole new life I was building, right?
Yeah.
Fast forward 3-4 different moves that we had because my husband was in a high executive corporate career. It took us all over. Mm-hmm. So I've had a million transitions in my life. Denmark, before that, even I had worked in other countries than Denmark. But then we were in LA, We went back to Denmark, we came back to the US, we went to China, we came back. And that's why I had different jobs in smaller companies. So transition after transition after transition. But for me, as I mentioned before, I didn't see it as that. I just saw it. Then this was the next logical move for us as a family based upon the life we wanted to build for our children, the financial outcomes that we were seeking, all these things, we were making decisions based on life.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't sitting down doing deep philosophical thoughts and processes of saying, is this purposeful? But today I see we could have. We could have done that along the way. We could also have said, no, this is not the right move for us. And be courageous enough to step back and say, let's figure out how we can make it work without taking that next move, without taking that next jump.
I hear you saying that, you're just kind of going along with life. And, it wasn't so deeply intentional saying, I'm looking for, purpose. But it sounds like somewhere along the line, you either stumbled across or fell into or became into a place where your work had meaning and purpose. Tell us about that.
So the interesting thing was when in the late 90s, we were living in Chicago at the time. That's when I started my interior design business, my own interior. I just sort of fell into that. And I've sewn since I was a little girl, and somebody needed some pillows and some window treatments. And can you do this? Sure, I can do this. And at the time, our children were young. And because of our family structure, it just wasn't possible for me to have a full-time high profile career. But I needed something to stimulate me, and building my own business, that was very stimulating. So as we moved to different places, I continued to rebuild my business every single time. And when we arrived in Arizona in 2014, I thought I was going to do the same thing. But then I had a really big aha moment. And that really big aha moment came from a couple of different things. My father passed away. There was some revelations with my father passing that just sort of made me pause. And then I started realizing that all those moves that we have done, the one thing that I didn't know that I packed in the moving boxes were all the ghosts in the closets. And finally, I had stopped long enough for them to show up. Because at that time, I started looking at my life. I started looking at saying, what have you really learned? What impact have you made? Have it just been busy work? Has it just, like, what is the purpose? Yeah, you're a mother of two beautiful, successful children, but is that really all? And to be honest, I was a little ashamed of the questions that I was asking myself. And that's what I think a lot of my clients, and I feel when my clients have the courage to say that and saying, I wanted more for myself.
How did you answer the question for yourself when you were experiencing that?
I started looking at the clues that we were talking about before. I started looking and saying, where had I been holding myself back? Where had I let other people direct me to something that maybe didn't fill my heart? Where was, as I mentioned, where didn't we just take the easiest solution and take the promotion and move with my husband's job?
Mm.
And when I gained my power, and you and I were talking about this the other day, is when I learned to look at it not as being a victim of circumstance, but understanding the power behind my own responsibility, about controlling the things that was within my control. my life started shifting. I started blaming, saying, oh, we can't afford this. My husband is always gone, blah, 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 blah. Excuses, excuses, excuses that seemed very reasonable to me. But it also gave me a scapegoat for not doing the things that I knew deep down in me that I really wanted to do. But
What
sort
was
of
some
put me alive, right?
what was something deep down that came out that you ended up doing?
It is, for me, the deep down is to help other people live that life that they're where they truly feel fulfilled, that they don't live with regret, that they don't stand like my father at 93 years old regretting that he had not supported my mother better. That's what I connected with, and saying, I don't want that for anybody. I certainly don't want it for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I started studying and saying, why do we do that?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that the human experience, that we are putting ourselves in so many boxes that we feel that we have no possibility to break out of?
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it sounds
once we
like
start, oh, sorry. Yeah.
go ahead.
No, but once we start opening those boxes and peeking out and seeing, wow, there's so much more out there.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I thought it sounds like your father's experience was very meaningful for you and it was very impactful. So now tell us about what you're doing today, the work that you're doing today.
So the work that I do with my clients today, it's about helping them. First and foremost, it always starts with uncovering what are the lies that your brain is telling you, why you can't do something, why this is not possible, why. That self-sabotage where you go in and block yourself from achieving what you want. And typically it starts with because you don't really want to admit what it is that you want.
Give us an example of a success story about someone you work with who you helped move from where they were to where they are now.
I think the best success story that I can think of in this connection, I'm talking a very, high achieving women, was a client that I work with. She had her own business. She wanted to negotiate some big contract with a company where she was going to provide the design for their furniture line and for their fabrics. She had a successful business, but she was selling herself short. She wanted deeply to be that textile designer. But she kept telling me a lot of excuses why she could not go for it, why she could not stand in her own power, brag about her talents, and just show up fully in her authentic self and saying, this design works, this design doesn't work. And as we started uncovering all the lies that she was telling herself, because that's what that internal bully does. It tells us lies that it's not, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do it. And they've been planted there throughout our whole lives. So that's where I start with my clients, figuring out first of all, you always have to figure out what do you really want. So we uncover that. And then we uncover why can't you actually have it? Or why you think you can't have it, I should say. And then the real work starts saying, now let's stream, now let's make it possible. And that's the fun part.
Yeah. I would imagine so. I would imagine so. All right. So now the podcast is Leadership Purpose. Oh, let's now talk a little bit more about purpose in general. You came to a place in your career journey where you felt you had more meaning and purpose in your work. Do you think it's important for people in general to have purpose in their life and or work?
I think it's the end, it's the fuel for the engine. But I also think sometimes that people mistakenly think that it has to be everything that they do. You can have a really high demanding career where part of that career does not satisfy your purpose, but there has to be part of it that does. Maybe if you work for a big corporation, maybe it's the mission of the company. You might not be purposeful training people, but it's the mission that drives you to do all the work that you do.
Mm.
Because let's face it, our purpose, when we define the purpose, is what makes the rest of the life livable. Because all our responsibilities do not go away just because we found our purpose. We still have to go up and brush our teeth and take a shower occasionally and do the dishes, right? So when you look at your life and all of those little things, you realize that they sustain that overall purpose that you have defined. Then life becomes a beautiful symphony of things you're really excited to do.
Yes, of course I share that experience as well. You're right. Purpose doesn't cure everything, but it gives you the fuel to keep going in the midst of all the things that are not necessarily perfect in the moment.
Yeah.
All right. So now, probably said this to you before, before we started recording or some other past conversation, but let me just say again, I created the podcast for high achieving women who are looking for more meaning and purpose in their life. But my definition of a high achieving woman is this. She's a woman who is responsible, ambitious in a positive way, goal oriented. She's good at a couple things. People come to her in her professional life for questions. She's the one that they come to all the time. In her home life, family, community, neighborhood, people come to her and ask her for support, no matter what it is about. And so she's always supporting everyone because, she looks like she has it all together and she does have a lot together. And so she's high achieving. So I think at the time I thought to myself, well, typically people don't see the high achieving woman as needing support, but who supports her while she's supporting everyone else? And so I thought when I started the podcast, this is who I'll speak to. Yeah, this will be their support and we can all speak to each other. And then after the first season or so, I thought, especially if they're at a place where they have success without meaning and without purpose, I'd like to speak to them. And so I have people like you come on. And so we have this conversation and then we can speak right into her heart and her mind. So now, with her in mind, what's some advice from your work or, yeah, some advice or expertise from your work or from your life that you'd like to share with the woman I just described? She's successful, high achieving, but she doesn't have meaning and purpose in her work, and she wants it.
So there's so many places you can start answering that question. But I think fundamentally, the first thing that she has to do is accept the fact that she deserves it. So many women, especially high achieving women that I speak with, they're like, yeah, but I should be grateful for what I have. You know, look at what I've achieved. It's amazing. But it's okay to admit to yourself and the world that it's not enough for you. Nothing you do will feel meaningful if you don't believe you deserve it. Then it's going to feel greedy. It is going to feel, I don't even know, it's just like yucky. I don't know a better word to describe it. It's never going to be feeling like it belongs to you.
Mm.
I think that is the biggest hurdle that I see for a lot of people.
Mm,
You are worth it and you deserve it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel like you're getting right to the heart of the matter.
Well, you know me, I
You're getting right to the heart of the matter. And I'm guessing that somebody's being inspired and by listening to you right now, encouraged. Um, Now, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to share before we tell people how they can get in touch with you and all that stuff? But is there anything from your life and or work that you'd like to share with people in general?
don't wait. I have a good friend of mine that told me this a long time ago, and I still live by this every day. In the week, we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Nowhere in that calendar does it say someday. If you constantly are looking to do something someday, it's never going to happen. So don't wait.
Feeling the power of that statement right now. Elsa, we've had these conversations before and we can go on and on. I know you have more in your day to do, but this has been a wonderful conversation. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom and expertise with us. And I'm imagining someone might want to know, well, how can I have more? How can I reach out to Elsa and have more, get more information? Where can they reach you?
But since we are talking about professional high achieving women, I will assume they are on LinkedIn. That's where they can most easily find me under Elsa Johnson Coaching. Connect, tell them you heard it here on this podcast, and we will have a conversation.
Love it. Love it. All right. Well, thank you again for sharing your time and wisdom with us. I really appreciate you. All right. And so, everyone who's listening, if you want to hear more from me and what I'm doing, you can reach me. I too am on LinkedIn. I mean, I'm on all the main social media channels, but I spend most of my time on LinkedIn. But you can find me anywhere at Robin L. Owens, PhD, at Robin L. Owens, PhD. Or you can go on over to the podcast website, leadershippurposepodcast.com, leadershippurposepodcast.com. And we have some resources there for you. And until next time, this is Dr. Robin.